Fiery, high-altitude, high-anxiety, near-disaster overnight. A United flight takes off from Newark when fireballs start shooting out of the engine, and that is just the beginning of this story. ABC's John Triffin is at the Newark airport with the very latest. John, good morning to you.
Dan, good morning. This certainly was a terrifying ordeal, not just for the passengers on board, but also for witnesses on the ground who watched with uncertainty as that plane stayed in the air for more than 2 hours. Now, eventually it did land safely here at Newark Airport, and this morning the airline is crediting the crew members on board for handling that emergency so well. On the ground, firefighters raced to the scene. In the air, hours of horror. It started just before 6 p.m. United Flight 96 was taking off from Newark when suddenly, according to reports, a tire burst and the debris was sucked into one of the plane's engines. Witnesses on the ground said they saw fire coming from the engine as they watched in suspense.
And as it was elevating, I noticed that there was a flame spitting out of the left engine, and it was kind of going like pop, 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 pop.
I ran to the window, looked outside, saw the airplane and saw fire coming out.
The Boeing 757 was headed to Berlin, but immediately turned around back for Newark.
This can be quite disturbing if you're sitting in the cabin and not understanding what goes on, because it's actually shooting what looks like fireballs out the front of the engine.
For 2 hours and 15 minutes, the plane circled, burning off fuel. Look at this flight path as the plane looped around Newark over and over. Finally, the plane made an emergency landing.
This is one of those emergencies that pilots train for all the time because it happens at the most critical period in flight. This crew did a terrific job in handling this emergency tonight.
And once again, there were no reports of any injuries for all 173 crew members and passengers on board. Once that flight eventually landed here safely at Newark Airport, the passengers were put on another flight to Berlin just a few hours later, Dan.
I was surprised some of those people actually were willing to get back on board a plane. So just to clarify, did the plane land with just one engine, John?
Well, Dan, the FAA actually says the engine was functioning normally once that plane landed. But interestingly, our aviation expert says this type of plane, a 757, is so powerful it can actually fly on just one engine, Dan Abbiano.
It's interesting to hear that the engine was still functioning after all those fireballs. John Triffin, thank you for your reporting this morning.